So the last few weeks, we've been preparing for the birth of Jesus. Last week, even talking about preparation for the birth of Jesus. This week, we're going to see how it happens. We're going to see the beginning of that birth of Jesus. And next week, we're going to talk about the celebration of that birth that happens on the same night. But before we get into that, it's important to remember that Jesus is the God who brings us peace. And our video today is going to talk a little bit about why we need peace and how Jesus brings that peace. Let's hear about it in our video for this morning.
When sin entered the world, peace between God and people was broken. But God promised to send a rescuer. Many years later, Isaiah the prophet said, "A child will be born for us, a son will be given to us. He will be called the Prince of Peace." Isaiah said the Prince of Peace would be from Galilee. God chose to send his son, Jesus, to the earth as a baby, and he chose Mary to be Jesus' mother. During the time Mary was pregnant with baby Jesus, the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus announced that everyone needed to be registered for a census. Every person traveled to the town where his family was from. Mary was engaged to Joseph. Since Joseph was a descendant of King David, he and Mary left their home in Nazareth of Galilee and traveled to Bethlehem, the city of David. While they were there, the time came for Mary to have her baby. Mary and Joseph looked for a safe place for Mary to have her baby, but every place was full because of all the people who were in town to be counted. So Mary and Joseph found a place where animals were kept, and that is where Mary had her baby. She wrapped baby Jesus tightly in cloth, and she laid him in a manger.
So as we reflect on that reading really came from Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 7. But what I want to focus on is how that baby in the manger brings peace. Because I think a lot of times our lives can be kind of a mess. I've got a picture that I wanted to show you guys this morning. I don't know that kid. I probably could have, if I thought about it, taken a picture of my house at the right time. But instead, this is a Google search. I searched "the house is a mess," and I found this picture, which I thought was really appropriately named. It was named "The Kids Live Here." And so, sometimes, right, we've been making these preparations for Christmas. There are some times when it feels like we've been preparing and preparing and preparing. But when play happens, messes happen. It's just the way that it is. And it doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. You can clean this up. Kids, you can be a part of this, right? Cleaning things up and getting ready for the holidays and hosting people and putting the toys away. But when play happens, mess happens. And the same is really true for our lives. When life happens, messes happen. And sometimes you might look at this picture and say, yeah, that's kind of the story of my life. Because our lives are messy. And the hard thing about the mess of our lives is it's not as easy as just saying, let's pick a handful of Legos up and put them in the bin. But sometimes the mess of our lives is the conflicts we have. Sometimes the mess of our lives is just making it through day to day. Sometimes the mess of our lives can look a lot of different ways, and most of the time the mess of our lives can be pretty complicated. But in our scripture reading for today, we actually have two kings that were mentioned in the video that their goal is to bring peace. And I want to mention both of them because I want you to see the contrast between how these kings bring peace. It's really interesting to me that the first person mentioned in the Christmas story is Caesar Augustus in Luke chapter 2. Now, you don't have to know all of the history of who Caesar Augustus is, but he's a pagan ruler. He probably did not in his entire life know about Jesus being born in Bethlehem, even though Jesus would change the entire world. And here we are sitting in this room where a lot of us probably don't know who Caesar Augustus is. Now, Caesar Augustus, his goal was peace. And he actually did a pretty good job of bringing peace. So this is the little history lesson that you need to know. He lived during this time that was called the Peace of Rome. He had a lot of give and take with the people that he ruled over in this huge Roman Empire, where he did a pretty good job of keeping war out and keeping peace present. He worked really hard for that peace. He had as much control over that peace as he possibly could. But the hard part about that peace is the way he maintained it. Well, he had to be a little bit ruthless to bring that peace. The peace that he brought was a peace that people in his kingdom had to sacrifice for. He had to be ruthless to get to the top. He had to be ruthless to maintain his place there. Caesar Augustus was kind of a bully who did whatever he wanted just because he wanted his peace. And we see that actually in this story. He makes this census, which is one of Caesar Augustus's ways of maintaining peace. But it kind of throws the rest of the world into chaos. He just snaps his fingers. Everybody has to do what he says. And so he says, now make this census, and go to those next verses. And what happens, something he couldn't have even anticipated if he tried, is that Joseph has to take his wife, who's somewhere between 36 weeks and 41 weeks pregnant. He has to take her on a 3-day journey down to Bethlehem. He has to take her when she is pretty much ready to give birth, 3 days away from the midwife, away from the nursery, away from the place that they were preparing to give birth. This isn't just an inconvenience. In the first century, this is dangerous to go give birth in this weird place. But that's what they had to do. Because Caesar Augustus, he had some kind of peace, but it had a heavy cost. And the people around him paid for that cost. And I think that in the middle of chaos, we want order. In the middle of the mess, we want order. We want peace. But sometimes even the Caesar Augustus kind of peace seems appealing. Because I can control it. Because I can work for this. And I really want to work really, really hard to get this peace. Maybe what it looks like is I want to have that peace at retirement that knows that I've got enough saved up that I don't have to worry about it. And so I'm going to work really hard and advance myself in my career. And maybe I'll step on who I need to step on to get to where I want to be. And maybe that's the kind of peace. Or kids, maybe it's in the middle of competition and you're playing the game and you know, okay, if the ref isn't looking, I can get a little shove here because I want the peace of winning the championship. And we step on others to get our kind of peace. Or maybe parents, we want so badly our kids to be successful members and contributors in society. And sometimes the ways that we try to get there actually pushes down the kids around them or the parents around us. Sometimes that kind of Caesar Augustus peace looks really appealing, that pushes others down to get the peace that he wants. Jesus brings a very different kind of peace. Let's go to that next verse and keep this in mind. Jesus doesn't look like a king here, but he is the king. He's the king of the entire universe. He has everything under control. Jesus is in charge because without him, this world wouldn't have been created. Jesus is in charge. And yet he brings peace in a very different way. He comes into the world, and when he's born, he doesn't upset everything. He doesn't have all of the midwives leave their families and come to him. No, he is born in a stable. The impact he makes to bring peace is so tiny that all he's doing is making one sheep eat out of a different manger. And Jesus comes into the world as a vulnerable little baby. And you see, Peace always has a cost. Peace is expensive. But Jesus pays the entire cost for peace. Because there at the beginning, what we heard about in our video, is at the beginning, sin entered the world. And ever since sin has been in the world, God and man have been separated. And in that separation, there is no peace. In that separation, there is only hardship. There is only a mess in between God and man. But when Jesus is born into the world, well, God and man come together in one person, in Jesus. And Jesus is our representative. Because it was our human race that broke the peace. Our human race had to set it straight again. And Jesus is born on Christmas Day so that he can stand in place for us and do something we never could do. He could bring peace between us and God. And that's what Jesus does. That's what it means to be our Prince of Peace. He comes into our world, and he brings a peace that is actually vulnerable, that makes the sacrifice, not making people around him sacrifice, so that every time that we have done it wrong, every time that we have messed up, every time that we've contributed to the separation, Jesus brings us together with God. He did it again at the beginning of this service. He does it again this Christmas season. So in the chaos, in the craziness, in the mess of Christmas, make sure to take intentional time with your family to rest in the peace of Christ. And know that just like many of us have experienced, when you are striving for peace, when you are trying to chase after that Caesar Augustus kind of peace, it is always just beyond your reach. You know what that feels like. And this is the hard thing, is that for a lot of people in the world, whether they recognize it or not, that's what they're doing. They're striving for a peace that they can never attain, but we know that peace comes through Christ. So this Christmas season, invite somebody along with you to experience that peace. Christmas Eve is coming. It's a lot easier to see baby Jesus than King Jesus reigning on his throne. Introduce baby Jesus to the people in your lives because they need the peace that you have as badly as you do. Our God, Jesus, was born in this world to bring us peace, to make the sacrifice for peace. Let's rest in that peace.